Welcome back, everybody. Time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here. We continue our look at when Brother Voodoo became Doctor Voodoo and the Sorcerer Supreme of the Marvel Universe. In part one, which I just posted, Brian Bendis talks about the Marvel Summit that resulted in Jericho Drumm replacing Doctor Strange as Marvel's Sorcerer Supreme. And now we turn to Rick Remender, who was given the task of writing the Dr. Voodoo solo book. And unfortunately, it only made it through 6 issues, which really bummed me out, because I thought it was a great, fresh concept. Luckily, the story continued in other Marvel books as well. But I think you'll enjoy this conversation from 2009 with Rick Remender. He also talks about a lot of his other great things that he was working on for Marvel, and or not only Marvel, but also like things like Thunderbolts and the Punisher. This was the beginning of Franken Castle, which was quite a controversial run for the Punisher that put Frank in with the Marvel monsters of the Marvel Universe. But we talk about that. We also talk about several of Rick's creator-owned projects back in the day, and it's a lot of fun. Rick Remender from 2009 on today's Word Balloon. This episode of Word Balloon is brought to you by Pulse College. Pulse College has 3 decades of a proven track record delivering professional industry training courses in audio, music, film, games, and animation. Since 1991, Pulse has received international recognition for both its vocational and practical-driven academic courses. All courses are designed and delivered by experienced industry professionals and offer cutting-edge blends of academic perspectives fused with practical skill sets in the areas of film, music, games, and animation. This, combined with the unique teaching and learning environment of the iconic Windmill Lane recording studios, makes world-class industry education attainable. Learners from around the world can join in a variety of short courses offered remotely via Zoom in the fields of sequential art and design, 2D animation, 3D animation, character design, and game environments. For more details, visit pulsecollege.com. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress with an important plea for 2023. You probably read the headlines. Word Balloon took a sponsorship hit that was pretty significant, and I'm asking you if you've ever been a fan of Word Balloon and considered making a donation through Patreon, a very meager but important subscription. I hope you'll consider it. It's going to be a challenging 2023, and I need your help. So if you like Word Balloon, if you enjoy the content, I'm not going to slow down and keep bringing you some excellent content, but I could really use your help via Patreon, patreon.com/wordballoon. If you can afford the price of a comic book, if you can even afford $1 a month, it would be greatly appreciated and help the cause to keep Word Balloon going at the level and intensity that I've been doing in the last 4 or 5 years, and bring you a lot more content and a lot of great interviews and interesting things about the pop culture world. Patreon.com/wordballoon. I could really use your help. Thank you for your attention, your time, and listening to Word Balloon. Word Balloon is brought to you by AlexRossArt.com. Alex has been a longtime sponsor of Word Balloon. I greatly appreciate it. You got to go to his website. You will find tremendous art from original work, covers, pages, fantastic lithographs, amazing posters. Every price point is covered, and every subject is covered at AlexRossArt.com. You've enjoyed his iconic looks at DC and Marvel, but also great stuff like his wonderful work on the Monkees, Monty Python, so many other great pop culture things that Alex has put his fingerprints on. His wonderful Flash Gordon poster that evokes the fantastic Dino De Laurentiis Sam Jones movie. Recently, Alex did things like the timeless Marvel covers featuring great solo shots of all your favorite Marvel heroes, and of course his Fantastic Four full circle graphic novel still available. All waiting for you now at AlexRossArt.com. In association with Newsarama, welcome again to Word Balloon, the Comic Book Conversation Show. This is John Suntress. Today, a discussion with Rick Remender. Rick's got a lot on his plate these days, not only from Marvel, but his own creator-owned books as well. We'll be talking about his work on The Punisher, Thunderbolts, a big 40-page special issue coming up for Rick, also his series Fear Agent, good news for his creator-owned series Nightmare. The N League is wrapping up. We will discuss that. But we start things off with a conversation about Dr. Voodoo and how all of it is affected by the current status quo of Dark Reign.
I understand you're going to Warsaw very shortly?
I am going to Warsaw, yeah. I'm writing a new game for EA Epic. I did a lot of writing on Dead Space, and it did really well. So my video game career is taking off at the same time as my comic and screenwriting career.
I didn't know you wrote on Dead Space. That's really cool.
Yeah, Warren Ellis did the first premise stuff, and then I did the first few 6-7 drafts, and then Anthony Janson did the rest.
That's really cool.
I leave my newborn daughter and my wife on Saturday to head off to Poland.
How long are you going to be in Poland?
A week.
Interesting.
A week. They would not budge. They wanted me in-house to do some of the prelim stuff, and so off I go.
Now, when you go there, what kind of involvement do you have in the game?
Quite a bit.
Character design?
Yeah. At this point, it looks like it, and they've got some good stuff so far. But they're really open to new ideas. And at the point the game is at, when I came on, they've built 3 or 4 levels, and it's stunning. It's just the kind of stuff you've come to expect from the company that made Gears of War. Yeah, it's absolutely stunning. So I get to go down there and see what they've cooked up and work with them, and it's fun. I did a lot of writing work on Dead Space and spent a lot of time working in-house at Electronic Arts, storyboarding things like the From Russia with Love video game.
That I remember. Yes.
And so it's fun. It's nice to have a little toe in the video game pool while doing the comic stuff concurrently.
That's very cool. I had no idea that you worked on Dead Space, though, and you were saying off the air that Warren Ellis and Anthony Janson as well?
Yeah, yep.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
It's smart.
Really well.
I remember a couple years ago talking to Paul Jenkins about, when he was working on like a Hulk game at the time, and, obviously, Bendis and Reed doing their stuff on computer games, and now Fraction's in that world and everything, and certainly Warren's been in that world. I think that's really, really cool and very smart, and it's, games are lucky to have you guys because now we got some, again, just like comics, we've got good adult writers that kind of understand the toy aspect but can also, put a smart story around it too.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what they're going for, trying to mix the two, and they're wide open to things. It's nice to come on and basically your mandate be to explode with ideas and not hold yourself back. And ultimately, then they have to sort of see what they can possibly do and what they possibly can't do. But it's really been a lot of fun to see some of the crazy ideas that I've come up with that have been well received and implemented into the game.
Very much like your Marvel work, where it seems like you're being given a couple really neat toys to play with, and everyone seems to be pretty open to your ideas of how to set the chessboard. Everybody's been great down there to me. I really have had nothing but pleasant experiences. Lauren Sankovic, who I'm working with on Dr. Voodoo in Brevoort's office, and Axel and Bill Roseman and everybody who I've been in cahoots with, and Sebastian in Axel's office. I've got a group of people down there who, when we talk and do story stuff, it's always very positive, and we come out of it very excited, and we have similar sensibilities, and it's nice for me, these are the kind of characters I really like, and the kind of things that I want to do, they're open to me doing, and it's a part of the Marvel Universe dealing with a lot of the supernatural stuff that it's been out there, and I think that Fred's doing some nice stuff in the Marvel Zombies book. Mm-hmm.
There's also definitely some great stuff going on by Jason Aaron with Ghost Rider.
Yes.
But it's sort of the supernatural stuff is scattered, and it plays big roles. You have guys like Mephisto changing, and the history of the Marvel Universe and tampering with reality. You've got all these kind of crazy, great things going on in the supernatural world, and there's not really a central book for it. And so, segueing into the Doctor Voodoo thing, that's sort of the thing that I'm sort of like a kid excited about. You know, the Punisher stuff is amazing too, but it's nice to be sort of given the reins with a couple of underutilized characters, and Marvel gets behind it in a pretty big way.
Now, tell me, because Ben has told me about how you know, from his standpoint, how you got the gig, or at least pitched for the gig. Mm-hmm. Tell me how it happened in your words, in terms of how you let it be known that you wanted to get involved with Dr. Voodoo.
Well, we were. It's funny because we talk story stuff while we play our Nazi zombie game on the Nerd Box, and it's sort of, if you imagine working at home all day, all night, this is a very nice. The Xbox is a very nice. It's the water cooler. You take an hour off in the evening, and you get to talk shop with colleagues and shoot zombies. Pretty good. And,
as opposed to like playing the front nine at a golf course or whatever.
Yeah.
Nice shot on a Fritz there, Ed. Nice kill.
It's so the equivalent. It's so the equivalent. It really is.
That's good.
And so one night we were on there, and Brian was talking about his plans for the Sorcerer Supreme, and he said Dr. Voodoo, and I lost my mind with excitement because I had turned Dr. Voodoo into the Sorcerer Supreme in like a what-if issue 3 or 4 years ago and had him lead the X-Men. And it's just this idea that I love it. And it was so funny that Brian came up with it independently and loved it too, and we started talking about like how Jericho Drum is such a great character and completely underutilized, and he could go any direction with it. And so once I knew that that was the way Brian was going with it, I literally took everything off of my schedule for a week and wrote a Bible for what I would do with an ongoing, with the understanding that getting approval for an ongoing with Brother Voodoo might be difficult, but I just when you get excited about something, you get excited about it, and you got to move. And so I did, and I spent literally a week in here putting together a Bible and fleshing out the Loas and this sort of Asgardian style family of voodoo characters that would then fit in, so that it's not, you want the new Sorcerer Supreme to have a very unique and distinct sort of universe to live in, while incorporating the same relics that he inherits from Stephen Strange. You don't want this to be a Stephen Strange book.
Right.
This is going to be a darker, and you see everybody say darker as if that's going to somehow make it more interesting. It's more adult. You don't have, it's actually got the same sort of bouncy, fun, meta, crazy stuff that you want to see in a Doctor Strange book, but given some of the subject matter and given the character, it has more of a monster lean.
Okay. Well, and that makes sense. Yeah. That makes sense from a supernatural standpoint, and from where Jericho Drum's magic comes from,
right?
As opposed to where Stephen's magic comes from. So
and they're and they have similarities, but Jericho is the Hunyan Supreme, which is the voodoo version. Every single one of the sort of cults and religions and different sort of mystic arts groups throughout the Marvel Universe have their own quote-unquote supreme sorcerer, and Jericho is the Hunyan Supreme, which makes him basically a double. He's got a lot of tricks in his bag. But anyway, it's really important to me to put like a limit and on how magic works, and to deal with the broader sort of Marvel Universe, how magic is working throughout the Marvel Universe, because it does seem to be sort of out of control. The vampires are taking over London, and the Marvel zombies are seeping in, and Mephisto is playing with reality, and Doctor Doom is always out there doing his thing, and Dormammu is sneaking in through the hood, and the Nightmare is making plans, and all these different fun things are going on. And so it was difficult to try and find a way to make it work. But one thing that, after talking with Brian a little bit more, was cooking up some ideas on bigger event things that we both got incredibly excited about, that play into the supernatural universe, unlike anything that we've seen ever happen. And so what we're doing is the Book of Vishanti and the Eye of Amagado have been warning, if you read the new Avengers stuff, the Eye is warning of something very dark coming. And so what we're doing in the Doctor Voodoo series is seeding that dark thing and building it and getting into what that dark thing is. And then when you see what that dark thing is and just how far-reaching it is, it's going to explode. And then you've got the new Doctor, the new Sorcerer Supreme out there in the middle of it. He has to call in his teammates in the Avengers, I'm imagining, and we don't, without giving away too much, it's going to be big and fun.
That's great, and it's like, Abnett Lanning and Bill Roseman and all of those guys are kind of putting the galactic Marvel universe in order, and, the street-level universe seemed to be the first concern of, like, the last 10 years, and certainly the last 5 years with the various events that have been happening recently, and now you get to play in the supernatural and mystic world and do the same thing and kind of create a new status quo. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping to accomplish with it, and the first couple 2-3 issues are done, and I've got art from Hefte Paulo back from the first issue and some of the second, and the editor Lauren and I are we just couldn't be more excited about it. The pages are coming in; they look perfect.
Now I know Mark Waid is working on a Doctor Strange story as well. How much in concert will the two books be?
I've talked to Mark. And in the first issue, I deal with some of the things that are going to be happening in his first issue, so they bounce off of one another.
Okay.
Stephen Strange isn't going to be playing, without giving away too much, he can't play sort of an Ancient One style role to Jericho for very long.
Okay.
So they have sort of he plays that role, and he gives him sort of a crash course, and then he's off to deal with the things that Mark is putting him through. Which obviously I don't want to go into, but they're very, very excellent ideas. I mean, if you're a fan of this stuff, and this is classic Marvel stuff that I think has sort of been it's been utilized well, but maybe not as well as it could have been. These characters have been sitting in a treasure chest, and I think that somebody at one point said that Doctor Strange has been pitched so many times that they didn't know which way to go with it. And so I'm really excited to be part of the direction that they did decide to go with, because with the things that are happening, it's difficult to talk about when you can't go into details.
Sure.
Other than just to keep repeating the word, I'm very excited. I'm very excited. I'm very excited.
Well, let's look at his past for a second. Who was writing Dr. Voodoo or Brother Voodoo back in the day?
It was wasn't it Roy Thomas?
Makes sense. No, it makes sense, and I mean I know a lot of times it would be Roy and maybe Jerry Conway or Steve Englehart that kind of are on the initial.
Right. Well, those guys. Englehart was over on Man Thing and
Strange. And Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange with Frank Bruner and all those guys. Yeah, I was created by Len Wein. Yeah.
Okay.
So but I for some reason think it was Roy who wrote a lot of it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Where like a lot of times one of them would start with it and then hand it off to somebody, and then somebody else would write a lot, the majority of the first few issues or whatever.
When you think about what that generation of guys that Marvel did in the '70s, it was an awful lot. It was an awful lot. They're maybe the unsung generation on some level.
I agree, but they're the group of guys that I enjoy talking to. I've had Steve Englehart on before, and haven't had Roy and Len at length. I've had Len on quick little floor hits at conventions, but I was saying the same thing to Jerry Conway, where you're right. I think that generation came in much like this current generation of you guys as well, in terms of taking what was established and then now let's turn the corner a little bit and. It suddenly, things just expanded. The universe expanded in the 70s in those guys' hands, and I think we're seeing that again now in this second decade of the 21st century.
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, you look at at this point, with what Marvel's been doing, every character. I mean, I honestly feel like the supernatural thing is the last thing to sort of dig into. It happens to be the thing I wanted to do too. And I'm not saying, I'm probably woefully sort of like stepping on somebody who's done a lot of work with this stuff over the last 6-7 years, and I don't mean to be. I've just been unaware of it, if so. But ultimately, I think that the, Iron Fist, down to Iron Fist, with Ed Brubaker and Matt Fraction pouring love into making Iron Fist an awesome character again.
Yep.
Marvel's going through their catalog and making sure that everything is awesome, and this is for me, digging around in the supernatural stuff. I think people like it, and I think that it just needs to be sort of presented in a certain light, and I think that it needs to be. The stories need to be smart. The characters need to, there needs to be real rich characters with, the stories need to have velocity. And I think that there's something that Brian has always said in regards to this stuff. It needs to be important. And when you look at the effects that a lot of the supernatural characters have had on Marvel history and events in the last 10 years, it has been important.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've got coming up will definitely be that.
That's very cool, man. Now, you mentioned Iron Fist, and I can't help but notice that you got an interesting one-shot coming of the Thunderbolts. And I know Diggle is the regular writer, but you're coming on for this one expanded story, and Iron Fist and Luke Cage play a big part in this story.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I am doing a 40-page special that buffers between Diggle and new regular writer Jeff Parker.
Very cool.
And the idea when I was talking to Bill Roseman, the editor, about it, was something that there's some things coming up, and I had some solutions on how to seed them and how to also have a really fun story with the Power Man and the Iron Fist and the Thunderbolts and the Norman Osborn. And it all kind of came together. So, and that thing is just about finished, I think. Waiting on the inks right now, and it turned out great.
That's cool. And this artist is one of Jay Ferber's Dynamo 5 guys?
Yes. I always bastardize his name. Mahmoud, and he's I think he's done like 20, 24, 25 issues with Jay.
Very cool.
And all of them have just been stellar. I mean, when Bill mentioned him, I hadn't seen a whole lot of his work. Making comics all day long, you don't have as much time as you would like to read them. And when I got a chance to look it over, I was blown away and excited to be working with him. Guys like Jerome and Tony and Kieran and the guys I came up working with, I'm spoiled because I think that those guys are on par with anybody. So
I agree.
And then getting to sort, and then when people see what Hefte Paulo's doing on Doctor Voodoo, they're going to be blown away. He's Walt Simonson and Tim Sale and Little Sienkiewicz, and he's just mind-boggling good. This stuff is so fun. But the big stuff, I mean, getting to write for John Romita Jr. and Jason Pearson, that's insanity. Those guys are it. But
Howard Chaykin.
And Howard Chaykin. I mean, my time at Marvel has I haven't been exactly slumming it. I've gotten one great artist after another, and mixing in guys like Jerome Pena and Tan and Huat and Tony Moore, and I do sit back some days, even though you get stressed out and overworked, and look at all the pages as they're flooding in and go, oh wow, this is a pretty good job. Oh hey, I just told the greatest artist in the world what to draw. Hey, all right.
Well, and this is interesting because the story, obviously, as you say, bridges between Andy's run and Jeff's run. But yeah, this still has very much to do with Norman's current plans in the Marvel Universe. The
plans that Norman the plans that he's cooked up here deal with bringing in more than just villains into the Thunderbolts. As is pretty obvious with Luke Cage and Iron Fist being brought in. Now, how he does that and what his real agenda is. Norman, that's the fun about writing Norman. You put the one agenda out, but you always have to realize there's four agendas behind that agenda.
Sure.
He's a tactician, and if you're not writing him that way, it sort of detracts from the great, connivingness of his character. I mean, look how many years he was playing with Peter Parker's life back in the day, and feigning amnesia and doing all this craziness. So his motives in this one are pretty fun, and they one of them ties up a loose thread that goes back into some Spider-Man comics. that I recall reading a few years ago, and it fit perfectly in this. Some things dealing with Luke Cage and Norman, some history they have, and then the rest of it is this new program that he's implementing, where he's trying to bring in, there's a lot of great villains to bring in, but at some point he realizes that there's a large sea of superhumans, whether they consider themselves heroes or villains, and that people's motivations are easily manipulated, and that if he considers who the person is that he wants to bring in, that he could probably pretty easily figure out how to get them to work for him.
And also, I wanted to jump back to Dr. Voodoo for a second. Now, him being the Sorcerer Supreme, the other men that Stephen Strange kind of, hunted around, both fearing that they might become Sorcerer Supreme,
yep,
or even the ones that he was possibly mentoring, I imagine they will play big roles in the Dr. Voodoo series. And
yeah, absolutely. And those characters play a giant role. I mean, in the first issue, we see two of the biggest Marvel villains of all time, and in a big way. No, I mean, Jericho's situation is that he basically is handed the keys to the car, but nobody thinks that he can handle driving it.
Sure.
And, so everybody in the Marvel Universe who thought that they were up for the job, or especially the villains, and especially interdimensional baddies who are trying to seep into our world, they all look at that as a prime opportunity to kick Jericho's ass and take what's theirs. So Jericho has a lot to prove, and at the same time, he's that guy who's, I draw the analogy that he's the guy who's, you get the job that you've been trying to get for your whole life, and you're there that first week, and you're working so hard to, impress everybody and do such a great job that you make some mistakes and basically collapse from exhaustion at the end of it all. He's still trying to keep his clinic open. I mean, Jericho's thing is that he's been happy to serve New Orleans and to sort of be the, be on Bourbon Street with his clinic and help those in need as a doctor. And so he won't give up on that. To Jericho, it's very important. The broad strokes are as important or the details are as important as the broad strokes, is how he says it. Keeping the community that he's dedicated himself to helping, as well as saving the universe. these things to him are both important. He's utterly exhausted, and then he's going up against. I don't want to give it away, because
okay,
the way we have it structured is we see a lot of the different candidates for Sorcerer Supreme in the book, as well as 3 or 4 of the biggest Marvel villains playing a role in a conspiracy that. It's a lot of fun to watch Jericho try and get out of it.
So we will see the realities of New Orleans, though, in the book as well, and the current condition of the state of the city.
Yeah, and yeah, there's and things are going to happen there.
Okay. Interesting. Well, and that's another interesting thing too, is taking the action away from New York, where 90% of the Marvel universe seems to reside.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I absolutely find it fascinating, and it's a really interesting city. So it's a lot of fun to get to put him in a new place, or to write a story in a city that's not New York. But ultimately, it's also the story. I like dimension hopping. Now, it's not alternate universe hopping, but dimension hopping. All of these different
planes of existence.
Planes of existence, and it's in the 616. That's what's great about dimensions, quote unquote. And we call it the Ever Dimensions in the new Sorcerer Supreme book, because
cool. In
the Ever Dimensions, that's where you have all of these various Doctor Strange villains that have existed throughout the last 30, 40 years, and we do a lot of getting lost in the Ever Dimensions, and I think that plays a big part in keeping the locations changing. When when you're in the middle of a fight for your life against Doctor Doom, and the machine he's using to teleport you through dimensions gets broken, and you find yourself stranded in a strange dimension. It's a lot of fun to discover what dimension you're in. I don't know. I mean, that to me is like one of the great things about the Sorcerer Supreme books, is being able to sort of, once you've got your story foundation, is to sort of go nuts with the imagination and try and figure out, like, what's the craziest kind of dimension you can drop him off in for a couple 12 pages, and ultimately, it's on the tip of my tongue, the guy's name. But the first arc revolves around one really, really cool supernatural villain who I've always thought was sort of underutilized.
Cool. Well, and much like the Punisher, it sounds like Dr. Voodoo is going to be an interesting hero surrounded by, familiar villains, and I think that makes for interesting stories. And while I mentioned the Punisher, I have to acknowledge what's going on right now in the book because, man, if we thought we were having fun during Secret Invasion and watching Frank off Skrulls and the craziness there, I mean, once Norman took control, you were there with that great kind of Lee Harvey Oswald moment of Frank, having Norman in his scopes and trying to take him out as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think Frank in the 616, when this kind of stuff is happening, it's an example of an event really aiding a book's momentum. I think that the 616, if we're going to be pure nerds here and utilize the Alan Moore Captain Britain 616 stuff.
Oh yeah.
The current Marvel universe. I think that ultimately it's got dudes who are flying around full of radioactive energy, and the guy's bitten by magic spiders, and there's crystals that grant wishes. I think when you're in that world, if you're the dude with the gun trying to kill a cocaine dealer, nobody cares. And I'm not saying that a good crime story or a good noir, hardcore crime story isn't great. I think that they are great. I think Garth Ennis showed that. But I think that Fraction showed that there's also room for a Punisher who exists, who can shoot Stiltman in the taint. In the absurdist sort of wonderfulness that the kind of stuff that he was doing there. And for me, I wanted to take a little from column A, a little from column B, and mix in my own sensibility and my own fast-paced sort of love of high-octane adventure stuff. And here we have a situation where Frank Castle realizes that his country's being taken over by a crook. So if there's ever a time when he's going to climb up and take a shot, that's it. And then of course, as we were developing this, it made no sense at all that Norman would be concerned with Frank. He's concerned in the back of his head once he gets some of the bigger things in order. He's going to kill the guy who tried to kill him, but he's not going to put it as his number one priority at that point. Which
sure.
Is what sort of delegates to the Hood, and then the Hood, not knowing much about Frank, takes his Dormammu power and brings Microchip back to life. And so now you've got the guy who knows Frank best, and I really love telling a story with Frank that does have this fantasy element to it. I think it really works. It sort of like ties in. It fills it. I can't work on Fear Agent as much anymore, and as I'm finishing out the last arc, I hit it and pick at it. So the Punisher stuff has really filled that void in my writing world.
Interesting.
It's very similar to me. That sort of big crazy ideas, but told from a place with real emotional integrity, where the characters are actually dealing with the insanity. That flying fish really did screw up my day. But it's fun. I like it when I read it, and so I try and sort of build my stories that way. And man, I couldn't be having more fun on the Punisher.
Well, and it's fun to see these villains that have been brought back to life too, and some of them are very forgettable names, and
right.
I'm sure live in the quarter boxes of many a convention and back of a comic store. But
Grunwald killed him for a reason. He created most of them. That's the thing about it.
Really interesting.
Yeah. A lot of them. Yeah.
That's cool. So is Jen very proud that Dad's characters are out and playing and everything?
I hope so. I sure do love the characters.
That comes through, man. It definitely comes through because they've got their zaniness that they had, 25 years ago, but also there's a real pall over them, obviously, as well, because they've been brought back to life for just 30 days, correct?
That's what they're working under, is that they have 30 days to kill Frank Castle, or they do not continue to breathe. They will be bereft of life. But and I think people expected this to be Frank just murdering these guys, and when I was cooking up the second arc and I was sort of thinking about how it was going to play out, this was something that these characters, I remember being a kid reading Captain America and all the other Marvel books back in 87, 88 when these characters were being offed. And I remember thinking, like, Death Adder, you don't kill Death Adder. He's great. Basilisk, I remember thinking, like, oh, those are all very cool. So, look at that girl in the Viking outfit. I bet she's cool. I remember thinking that, like, I bet you could do cool things with those characters. And so I was like, hey, wait a minute. I guess I have a chance here, too. So, we augmented some of their powers. And, like, the Human Fly, are you kidding?
Exactly. Yes.
The Human Fly? Why is this not? So, the Human Fly, I don't want to let you know if he lives or dies, but he is awesome. By the time we get done reworking him, he spits, he pukes up acid, and his wings are razor sharp, and he's fast as lightning, and he's crazy out of his head, which can get boring, so I'm not doing it with all the characters, but with him it's perfect. I just think, he's scattered, and it just kind of fits for me when you think about, like, a fly. Here's this guy with his thoughts are all scattered all over the place, and he can't stick on one train of thought for very long. And it also has a lot to do with each one of these characters and sort of as they've been resurrected, depending on how, some of them came back pretty out of their head. The time in hell can be bad for the soul.
Sure.
And the Fly definitely bore the brunt of wherever he spent the last 20 years, 30 years.
Well, and I also love how they can't believe how much the world has changed since they've died.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
I hate to keep saying that it's been fun. I recognize when I do these, when I talk to you, I listened. I made the mistake of listening to one once. Like, it's fun. I'm having fun. Oh, it's so much fun. Oh, John, it's such fun. Fun. But it is. It's so fun. What else am I going to do? Anyway, so the dealing with these characters was like, it's like, oh, well, here's a bunch of great characters, and Tannen Huat's going to come in and redesign them and make them modern and killer. And, with, like, Letha and Lascivious, when we were dealing with what we were going to do for the annual, we wanted to tie into the Dead End arc. With somebody like Jason Pearson coming on, and, we knew we wanted to have Spider-Man involved because he was involved in, the Human Fly's life and peripherally in Letha and Lascivious and dealing with some of the stuff in Marvel 2-in-1. If I could put on my continuity hat. The great fun there was that the annuals, like those old annuals when they mattered, when annuals were by Mike Golden and Art Adams, and when you got an annual, it was like, hot damn, it's an annual. This is going to be great. And it was a big story, and it would sometimes have a lot to do with things that were going on in the book you were reading, introducing Rogue or bringing in Long Shot to the X-Men or, whatever cool things that were going on in those annuals. We wanted to do that, and so this really does fulfill that need, and it's got Jason Pearson doing work that's on par with Michael Golden and Art Adams and those guys. And it's got a story that develops a little bit of two of the members of the Deadly Dozen, this new band of Scourge victims that have been brought back.
Cool.
As well as Spider-Man, crazy, Letha.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because I think Peter keeps the power that he really has in check.
Right.
So that's going to be, I imagine, a psychotic Spider-Man is a Spider-Man off the hook.
Yeah, you're not. It's so insane what we do. It's so crazy. It's so much fun.
Good.
I mean, he throws Frank all over New York, and it also, at the same time, Frank is still trying to hunt down Letha and Lascivious. And in order to get Spider-Man to no longer be crazy and feral, he has to either knock out or kill Letha. And so he's basically chasing them while they're trying. And of course, Letha and Lascivious want to kill Frank so that they can extend their lives. It just became the scene. It's Reservoir Dogs when everybody's got their guns on one another, and in a big way. The way it came together felt like a lightning bolt of like, oh wow, that worked out. That worked out real well, and the story kind of shows. And Axel and I went back and forth on it like 5-6 times because the beats, very very important to smooth that stuff out. And Jason's storytelling is perfect, but you've got a responsibility at that point when you've got a foundation that I think is as great as that is to tell a really good story and give Jason Pearson something fun to draw. And Letha and Lascivious have been augmented by the Hood with these new abilities, and they've always been super strong. They were former wrestlers in the 70s. I did a little Andy Kaufman, sorry.
That's all right.
They've been augmented to also have new abilities where Letha can basically unlock the lizard cortex center of the human brain and turn you into a feral animal, and Lascivious can turn you into a lusting, sex-deprived maniac. So they use their powers on Spider-Man, and Letha unlocks the rage. And Spider-Man realizes that every time he's let Frank go or been lenient with Frank or not just taken Frank out of the picture, Frank goes out and kills people, and that puts it on Spider-Man. He's not happy that it potentially feels like it puts it a little bit on him that he didn't take Frank out when he had the chance. So he's now going, when he's no longer got anything sort of hindering his anger, it explodes and off he goes to kill Frank. It's a fun flip. It's a fun flip to have Spider-Man out hunting to kill Frank Castle.
Very cool. Now, order of events for these things, because does the annual come out first?
The annual comes out in late September, I believe.
Okay.
And it takes place a little bit before issue 7 of the book.
Okay.
But you don't necessarily, once you read it, you see it fills in some gaps. It works out just fine.
And then when does the list come out?
And then the list comes out right after that. So
okay.
I think it goes issue 9, 10, the list. No, 9, 10, 9 annual, 10 list, and then Tony Moore and I start our arc with issue 11.
Okay. Very cool. And as you were saying, the list is drawn by John Romita Jr. and Klaus Janson.
John Romita Jr. and Klaus Janson. I mean, I guess they didn't have any good artists around.
Yeah, really.
Right?
Slumming it. I'm really curious to see what John Romita Jr. does with the Punisher. I don't know if we've ever seen that before.
No, we've never seen that. No, it's like, oh, would you like to work with Jack Kirby and Joe Sinnott? No, thanks.
Man.
Yeah, no, it's great, and he called me and we chatted up the story, and he seems to be really enthusiastic about it. It's what else can you say besides, wow, that's a lot of fun. We have a lot of momentum going with the story. All of the stuff we're doing plays a role in a big sweeping arc. Like by the time you've read Punisher 1 through 10, the annual and the list, you see it's one giant story. Everything that is seeded in those first 5 issues has that's something that I always get very frustrated with, is when things happen and they're seeded and there's never any payoff for them. So it's all payoff. Issues 9, we find out where Henry's from and what his background is and how that affects Frank. In 10, we have Frank versus the Hood. Unbelievable, gut-wrenching, terrible, terrible things happen to both of these guys, and not just fisticuffs and knife fights, but like tear your soul out stuff. And I was really glad that we was really glad that we got to do it, because I think that it's a really nice ending for something that's taken a year. It's been a nice big arc, and 10 ends that. And then after 10, we find Frank. Where we find him when John Romita and Klaus come on to take him through the list, and that's Norman Osborn basically waking up one day and saying, "Oh, hey, yeah, that guy who took a shot at me. Tell you what, get Hammer on the line, dedicate every Hammer resource for an afternoon, and go kill that guy. And maybe take a couple Dark Avengers, and I'll go too." So
nice.
It's a bad afternoon for Frank Castle. It's a really bad afternoon. And if you want to write a story about Frank Castle having a really bad afternoon, and fighting the son of Wolverine and many Hammer agents, I think that you want to get John Romita Jr. and Klaus Janson.
That sounds great. So then that culminates to Punisher R.I.P. Then the events that happen in the list move on to
the list, and it's that arc has been announced. It's called Franken Castle. The preview images have gone up, and you can see some of Tony Moore's designs on Marvel.com.
Cool.
They're not. It's not. It's not. You know, there's still some surprises to come up about what's going on here. I think you can kind of piece some of it together, but what's coming up is so much fun. Between like the characters that we're dealing with in Franken Castle's new afterlife, and you know the Doctor Voodoo stuff. It's just if you look at a lot of my earlier creator-owned work, like Doll and Creature and Sea of Red, and dealing with, you know, chicks dressed like mummies and zombies and triple X zombies, and you know, I like monsters. I really like monsters, and so getting to jump in with these Marvel monsters and mix and mash and start telling, you know, big stories, man. I guess it's fun, John.
This would be the drinking game word, kids. If you're not on your second fifth of vodka, then you're not playing it right. Clearly. Clearly, as we are, because I can tell you right now, I'm cracking the next Smirnoff right now.
I can already see the little counter when you play the podcast with the fun counter. Fun. Ding, 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 ding.
You know, my BlackBerry Storm might go off as it did during my Brian Azzarello conversation. So if you do hear a pinball machine in the background, that's what it is.
Your BlackBerry Storm. That doesn't sound like a phone. That sounds like a stripper or something. That sounds like a dangerous assassin.
Nobody does a lap dance like BlackBerry Storm, sir.
BlackBerry Storm, get over here. I'm buying for my buddy John.
See, I'll say something crass, Rick. I won't let you. You know, you get in enough trouble on podcasts. I'll take care of it this time. Don't worry about it.
Thank you for taking that bullet.
Well, as we turn the page, because you mentioned some of your creator-owned stuff, the images that we've seen of the Last Days of Crime that are coming in December from Radical looks fantastic. And man, I got to tell you, if you're a crime fan, 2009 is going to go down as a great year, man. We had The Hunter from Darwin Cook.
Yep.
And I think Azzarello and Ian Rankin are kicking ass on their Vertigo crime line books.
Yep.
And this looks like it's going to look really nice on the bookshelf next to all these things.
It's a nice change of pace too. You know, it's fun. I like genre jumping, and it flexes different muscles, and you get to write different kinds of dialogue and explore different kinds of characters. And it's hard to sometimes turn off your big ideas. And in this case, we've got the big idea in that after a few dirty bombs go off, the American government, some scientists engineer a broadcast that inhibits your ability to do anything that you know to be unlawful. And they decide that, hey, you know, there's nothing illegal about making people follow the law, and can't have any more terrorist attacks, so we're going to broadcast this thing. So high concept-wise, it's got a little bit of a sci-fi kick in that the Washington Post basically breaks the story that the U.S. government plans on broadcasting this mind ray from every radio tower across the country on New Year's Eve. So naturally, you've got a lot of craziness happening in the United States for these 2 weeks. It's going to happen. You can't stop it. You can't change the government from doing it. You've got, you know, terrorist groups, listen to me. You've got bands of citizens blowing up radio towers. You've got people revolting. You've got mass exodus to Canada and Mexico. And then you've just got a lot of people trying to, you know, just complacent or accepting that this is what's going to happen, and so they're going to get their yayas out and any sort of filthy fetish that they need to take care of, or some dude hunting lions in a zoo, or whatever the fuck, you know, illegal stuff was important for you to do. This is when you go to do it. And the story then, that's actually the background of the story.
Sure.
It's the ticking time bomb, what we've got. The story revolves around a burned-out meth addict named Graham Brick, an old grifter, who he's been working at a bank. The second sort of high-concept thing that's going on in the United States within the story is that all money is being transferred from paper currency to fiduciary charging cards, where
Sure.
your pay just goes on your plastic and you never see any cash. Now, obviously, that's something that their plan, or you know, I've read will maybe be implemented in the future, because without paper money, you can't do crime. Without paper money, you can't avoid, you know, taxes if it's all digitally trackable. So this is public knowledge. And Graham Brick, our grifter, has been working security under a false name with some false ID at one of the banks that have these charge machines. And he's got a plan where he can steal one of these things when they go online, with a hacker's help, basically move to the Bahamas and sit back and charge currency for the rest of his life. Of course, when they announced the American Peace Initiative, which is this broadcast, his plans are turned up quite unpredictably. He's given, instead of the 6 months he has planned to pull the heist, he's now got 2 weeks. And then after a few double crosses in the story, he's forced to pull in a few strangers. And then that gets pretty weird, as all good heist stories should. Things get incredibly complicated, and there's a lot of double crossing and gunfighting and car chasing.
And this is 3 issues. How big are the issues going to be?
They're 48 pages apiece.
Wow.
Which is it's great, and they're $5, and it's Greg Tocchini, who is sitting in his house in Brazil working like an animal for you people. The pages are so beautiful, like groundbreaking, next generation, amazing stuff. I mean, between working with Half Day Apollo and Tan and Greg and Tony and Jerome, I'm having a lot of fun these days. Things are going well with my artists, and what can I say about it other than if you get a chance to check it out, there's a preview up on comicbookresource.com, I think. There was a preview on Newsarama a while back. If you type it into Google, you can go see some of Tocchini's pages. They're astounding.
They're sick. They're amazing. They're
crazy, right? It's crazy. I look at the pages come in and I call friends up and I go, "You want to come over and look at this?"
I don't blame you.
I have concept art friends who live in Portland who will literally come over and we'll sit around and drink a beer and look at his pages and go, "Wow, how, what?"
No, they're very retro and modern at the same time, and they scream noir and they scream crime, and I think that's fantastic. And God, there's the hot chick reclining in her underwear. She looks fantastic.
Yeah, and then we've got Alex Maleev on covers.
Is that Alex's cover?
Yeah, you've got Alex Maleev on covers. For all 3 issues. You got 48 pages of painted interior, and everything's, and it's $5 an issue. So I'm just saying, if you like any of my other creator-owned work, this thing is on par. This is getting all the love I've got, and it's just been a blast to work on. And given the price point, if you can't try the first issue for $5, I don't know. I can't say go get a job because there aren't really that many jobs, I guess. So sorry, I guess.
Well, and I would say that Radical does a really good job of their stories are always, there's a lot of quality in each issue, and I mean I think from a presentation standpoint, you do get your money's worth, and so again from the preview art you can tell, and they give you a lot of it, I think, in each issue, and really $5 for 48 pages is it's certainly cheaper than 2 $3 22-page books. I'm not that good at math, but I do know that much.
Yeah. You're getting. I mean, it's cheaper, and it's a competitive market out there, and Radical's doing a good job of competing in it. And the situation with this thing was that they when we started talking about it, and Barry and I got into brass tacks. It was just a matter of, look, let's just go full bore on it, and. I went out on an artist hunt, and Raphael Albuquerque, a buddy of mine and super artist himself, turned me on to Greg. And when I told Greg the idea and what he'd be doing, he got right on board, and was excited to paint the interiors. And we've been working on it for about a year now to give him plenty of start time. The first issue's done, and he's well into the second. And then they brought in Alex to do covers, and they spared no expense. They've let me art direct it, which I always like to do in my books, and makes me feel very comfortable, and still gives my artist side something that I got that itch I got to scratch. So getting to sort of design the covers and make them look like old pulp novels and all the fun stuff we're going to be doing with it. It's going to be a great series. I stand behind it with whatever my shitty name is worth.
Well, back to superheroes. The N League is wrapping up. Issue 9 is coming out in October.
And that's with Andy McDonald. It's 40 pages, and it wraps up the first story.
That's cool, and I understand. And you've been very public about this on your blog and I don't know if you've said this as well at any of the comic news websites, but you are kind of, tying up loose ends with the creator-owned stuff to give your full focus on these Marvel books, given the projects that they're allowing you to work at with Marvel.
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't know. I mean, it's hard because you want to try and do it all, but I also know that I just keep going back to the same thing. Comics are expensive, and I never, I just want everything with my name on it. I never want to feel like, shit, that thing could have been better.
Sure.
I was so stressed out and rushed that month. And I've got some of that stuff in the past where I was doing way too much, and I was having to work a full-time job to pay life bills. And I'm doing 5 comics on the side, and just murdering myself. And, sometimes some things took a hit because I just couldn't, it had to get done. And I don't want to do that. I want every issue to be out of the park, and people to, if your name is not synonymous with quality and consistently, then you don't last. It's a very competitive industry, like we said, in all aspects, and creatively, and within publishers as well. So I'm put in a situation where I can try and keep all those things going concurrently, and I can stretch myself too thin, and the stories become watered down. And instead of each issue getting 5 great ideas, and then I have the time it takes to really flesh out the beats and make the page turns work, I'm instead just writing it like lightning fast, and I think that people can tell. I think the kind of people who read my comics can tell for sure. And the End League was coming to an end anyway, gigantic as well.
Mm-hmm.
Fear Agent, we have this last arc, which, there's 5 more issues, and it's 22 pages. We've been doing 16 pages an issue. This is back to 22 full pages, plus an 8-page Tales of the Fear Agent in each issue. So
yes.
The last arc will be, 30 pages of comic book per issue. It's the story that Tony and I started telling 5 years ago and initially sort of wanted to tell, and I'm making sure it's getting all the love I've got, and that's why we've sort of postponed the launching on it until we want 3 or 4 of the issues entirely finished, and nobody's rushed, and everybody's got all the time in the world to make it shine. And then from there out, the last days of American Crime goes December, January, February, and past that, I don't have any more creator-owned stuff for a little while, and I'm pretty sure that if there was anybody who was bummed out about that I've got 10 or 15 trade paperbacks of creator-owned stuff that they don't know about. If they went back and looked.
Sure, Sea of Red, Nightmare,
Yeah, I still try and push the Strange Girl stuff.
Strange Girl, sure.
There's such there's a bigger audience of female readers in comics now, and having having the star of your book being a smart female, I think it seems rare anyway in comic books. We don't see quite enough of it. And then I'm just going to give all my love to the folks at Marvel until
That's
they
cool.
don't want me no more.
Well, and you're putting End League, as you say, and Fear Agent at a place where it's good to stop here, but that doesn't mean that down the line you may come back to these and come up with more ideas. Sure. I know in the case of Fear Agent, the movie is kind of underway in production. Congratulations, and
thank you.
I think from the moment we saw issue 1, a lot of us that saw that first issue are like, this would make a hell of a movie. And I know you were thinking the same thing. And again, not to sacrifice the comic, that's self-evident in the books that you guys have all done
we didn't
too.
Make it with that intention, I mean, there's one thing, you read comics and you go, oh, that's a movie pitch. Come on. And then there are things that work on both ways, and I think that. Tony and I got really excited about Fear Agent, and I think that's sort of how I gauge if what I'm working on is good anymore, is if Kieran and I, or Jerome and I, or Tony and I, or any of the guys I'm working with, if we're getting excited about it while we're working on it, then good things are happening. And Fear Agent, Tony and I were really excited, and I think that, the concept does work with both.
That's very cool. And End League as well. I mean, I think End League, always a very interesting story, kind of this ragtag group of heroes that after the bad guys have won on this final quest to kind of wrest power back and get the world back on order, and doing it with very little resources and ability left to them when, all the villains have all the marbles and all the power.
I like the Road Warrior and I like superheroes, so I was sitting around one day and said, hey, Road Warrior and superheroes. And from there, it was just sort of taking somewhat familiar archetypes and somewhat familiar, tropes, and kind of trying to dust them off and do something fun and interesting, mixing some sort of, different eras of heroes: Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Modern Age, and hodgepodge of 7 or 8 heroes that are left when the villains have taken over the world, and they got to go find the hammer of Thor to turn the tide. But where's the hammer of Thor? And why is it so hard to find it?
There's a lot of interesting ideas here. Some are in the superhero world, and others are in other genres. And glad to hear about Nightmare, by the way.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Very cool. Also in production, film-wise?
Yeah. That one is at Animal Logic, the people who did all of the pretty stuff in 300 and The Matrix and Moulin Rouge and a bunch of movies, and they're fully producing it, and they've got a lot of interesting things coming up with that. And the film stuff is great. It's a lot of fun, and you get the imagination factory working at 4 a.m. when you're supposed to be sleeping, and you start thinking about what if it actually happened. So few of these things do. You take it with a grain of sort of cautious optimism in terms of that. But when you start thinking about what it could actually be, Animal Logic in terms of doing Nightmare, that's the effects house. Those are the guys.
No kidding. Yeah.
And, if it comes together with the people they want it to come together with, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah.
It's going to be like insanity. This thing that Kieran and I did, and we poured so much love into it back in 2005, and ultimately it sort of flew under the radar. At the same time, Fear Agent and the Sea of Red were coming out, and we were getting all of the attention we got at the time on those, and Nightmare just flew right under the radar. And I always try and drum up interest in it because I still really think it's one of the best things I've been associated with. And then that one is moving forward. So we'll hopefully have some news soon on Nightmare.
That's cool. Well, yeah, and fantasy is moving in that direction, it seems, from a film standpoint. So I think Nightmare and at that studio and everything is a very good fit. So I certainly hope that does come to light. I think and I know, but like I keep saying, Fear Agent, that's a slam dunk for a film. It is. What I was watching the other day, and I hadn't really put it together with Fear Agent, but Enemy Mine has a lot of the same kind of feel to it at parts.
Humanity in a desperate alien situation.
Yeah. And actually, I was really impressed with how much that film holds up, given that it was 25 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. I remember as a kid, I was really excited to see an alien, and whenever HBO would have that on, and then immediately really bummed out that alien didn't have a gun. The concept, now that you mention it, I'm like, that is an interesting concept for somebody who's not, 10. But when you're 10, I keep going, man, pull out a space gun and eat his brains. Brain eating.
And then, what do you mean he's pregnant? He's pregnant?
Yeah, right.
What the hell's going on?
Yeah, I remember that reveal, too, and I was like, change the channel.
I'm sure Happy Days is on somewhere right now.
Yeah, right.
That's fantastic, man. Well, dude, this is great. I seriously, Punisher is a blast, and I'm glad you're able to play with the character this way compared to what's happening in the Max line, where, again, there's nothing wrong with what's happening in the Max line.
Jason Aaron's going to be relaunching that with Steve Dillon on art and Dave Johnson on covers, and I know that he's told me what he's got planned for that, and it's going to be great. It is amazing. So I think it's a nice time to be a Punisher fan, and that if you really like the serious, hard-boiled stuff, the Max book is there, and it's going to just it's going to impress. The stories Jason comes up with, they're always, when you hear the idea, you always think, damn it. You never, ever hear Jason there and tell you his ideas and go, oh, well, whatever, you can have that one. It's always, damn it.
Brilliant.
Confound you. But anyway, so I wanted to make sure and give him a plug on that so that people know that there's good stuff going on for superhero-y Punisher and crime noir Punisher.
That's cool. Jason is like this gentle bear of like a man when he like describes his sick ideas, and it cracks me up because it's so deceptive because he really is kind of like almost like Merlin Olsen at the campfire, kind of Father Murphy telling you a story, and it's like, well, and then the man just skinned the bear alive. And you're like, dude, where does it come from in that mind?
That's so perfect. It's so true, too. It's so true.
He was killing me at the Chicago Con, and I told him, I'm like, dude, you're the scariest man I know. And he's like, in that, and then he became Father Murphy, and he's like, why would you say that to me? And I'm like, Jason, because you're like this nice, gentle man, and then you've got this dark side where I know there are bodies in that basement.
Yeah, there's bodies in the basement. I think you know. But what are you going to do? We get some good stories out of him before they find the body.
Exactly, man. So no, we love both sides of Jason's brain. He's a good man. So yes, so the Max series is in good hands. Is the 616 Frank, and Franken Castle is. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun down the line. Fun.
Yeah,
I guess is the key word. So
see, I did it again.
There you go. So as we make our listeners blind with all that they've just drank, maybe it's time for them to lie down. I will definitely be bugging you once Dr. Voodoo is up and running, because I'm looking forward to watching you shake things up. That'll do it for this edition of Word Balloon. Thanks for listening. This is John Suntress reminding you to come to wordballoon.com. You can also contact me via email, john@wordballoon.com. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, John Word Balloon, or at Facebook under my name, John Suntress. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions, copyright 2009.